Okay, let's admit it. Menopause, as we know, is already hell. And then society wants you to pretend aging is all about collagen and concealer. So today we have Karen Biesta here to tell us what no one is telling you about aging well. And you guys, it has nothing to do with beauty products. Now, Karen is a holistic health and lifestyle coach and the founder of Wellegant Woman, where she helps women over 40 transform their health, their mindset, their confidence so they can age powerfully and live with more energy, joy, and purpose. After navigating divorce and perimenopause herself, now she's been through menopause, all of it, right? She reinvented her life and now she helps other women do the same. And you might also recognize her as a voice on the host of Menopause Love Lounge podcast. Karen, hi.
Hi, how are
Ah,
you?
I am great. I am so excited just to have you on just for a few minutes. We're going to chat and talk about how your holistic health, your lifestyle coaching, all of that works together with what we're going through with menopause. So we're
Yeah.
going to focus on that. But I want to know, first of all, when you say aging well, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so I think we've been kind of sold this idea that aging well means maintaining our looks, maintaining our youth.
Mhm.
That's not what it is, in my opinion, at all. I think what aging well means to me is that
Mhm.
as we're getting older, we're getting more powerful. And
Ooh.
and I'll even define that further because I think it means we are emotionally regulated, we're physically strong, we
Mhm.
are clear about who we are, and we're unapologetic about what we want. I don't think we are taught any of that when we're younger. I think that's
Wow.
something that we have to sort of evolve into as we get
Mhm.
older. And to the extent that we can do that, we will age very well.
I love that. Those are four very powerful things that we are going through and coming forward as women. And I love hearing about that and how that relates to aging well. And what do you think that we miss when we're focusing more on just this external aging instead of the internal evolution? What can we gain by looking inside instead?
So I'm actually just reading this book. Have you read Age Like a Girl by Dr. Mindy
No,
Pelz by any chance? I
no.
know
And
we
I
had
love
talked
her.
about maybe having her on the Menopause Love Lounge podcast, which would be amazing.
Yes.
But one of the
Yes.
things she talks about in the book is that menopause is almost like a brain renovation. Like you think about
Mm,
your house, right? When you're renovating a house, it is a colossal mess before it
yes.
comes together, right? And she talks about the fact that that is quite literally what's happening to our brain. We have all of these neurological changes that we feel pretty much like a mess for a
Yeah.
while, but
Yeah.
it's actually an emotional upgrade, a mental upgrade. It's so I think that's where we get it wrong a little bit. We assume
Yeah.
that it's a decline. It's the beginning of the end.
We do.
And what she argues and what I would argue is that we're just in a period of renovation. And if
Hmm.
we can be compassionate with ourselves and if we can support our bodies and our minds and everything, our
Hmm.
lifestyle, if we can use all of those tools to support ourselves, we will come out, this upgraded, expanded version of ourselves.
Yes. And how exciting is that?
Yeah.
You're so right. We get stuck in just being complacent and just being okay with where we're at, and worrying so much about the number all the time. I was thinking about that. I have friends that just constantly throw the number out. They're like, well, I'm 53 years old. And I'm like, hey, let's do a
Yeah.
blanket statement. I know how
Yeah.
old you are, so you don't have to utilize that little phrase every time you want to
Yeah.
say why you can't do this or can't do that. It becomes a crutch or an excuse, right? And I thought, I hardly ever say my
Yeah.
age because it doesn't really have anything to do with it. I feel like I'm aging well from the inside out, right?
Yeah. And I think
So
that's something that, it was a belief in generations past that as you got older, you started shrinking. You
mhm,
became quieter, your world became smaller. That's I mean, it will be that if that's your belief, but I think the
yeah,
whole idea is, we need to think of it as an expansion and as an upgrade. And we need to stop
yeah,
assuming that, quote unquote, it all goes downhill over 40 or whatever. It's just,
yes,
we have to almost like reject all of that and rewire our brains so that we're just not tolerating those old shitty beliefs
Mm.
that
Yes,
controlled
ma'am.
our mothers and our grandmothers, you know?
Yes. Amen to that. I am on
Yeah.
board with that. I love it. I love it. So I have a list of some of the most important shifts that I think we need to make in order to allow us to age well, right? During these hardest times, especially during menopause. We want to touch on
Mhm.
menopause and even perimenopause. Okay, so can we go through these shifts? And I'm
Sure.
just going to kind of ask you, your opinion and thoughts on some of these.
Yeah.
So, shift number one would be radical self love. So, what does radical self love look like when you are exhausted and bloated and you can't even recognize yourself because of all these changes with your
Mhm.
body? What does that look like?
I think it's reminding ourselves again, we're
Mhm.
under renovation. It's
Yes,
temporary. We will come
that's a
through
great
it. And I think it
metaphor.
means also doing exactly what we just said, being willing to reject the,
Mm,
what
mm.
the media has presented about aging, being willing to
Yeah,
reject and kind of rewire our brains to think about aging and to think about our bodies and our life very
yeah,
differently. I
yeah.
think that's an act of radical self-love because let's face it, it's not easy when you're confronted with those messages day in and day out on social media, in the
Mm,
workplace. I mean, it's ageism is rampant all around us,
it is.
so it requires a lot of self-love to be able to say, I reject that. I'm going to give myself time to go through
Mhm.
this renovation and I'm going to just show up for myself every day. I'm going to take exquisite care of myself every day as I do
Mm.
this.
I love that. And I was going to ask you, what's one small thing you think that women can start doing just to start having some more radical self-love? And I think you kind of just hit on it is just little changes that are exquisite results, right?
Mhm.
Just kind of little things to make yourself a little bit different. But do you have anything else to add to that that maybe they could do?
For me personally, like, as I've said, this is my year to get my shit together after a rough
Mhm.
2025 and some health issues and things. I
Mhm.
think one of the biggest things I have committed to is just not being available for my own self abuse.
Mm,
We are so mean to ourselves. We speak so unkindly to ourselves
we
sometimes,
do.
and we don't even realize it. They're like those little thoughts that we'll think like, "Oh, I hate my arms," or,
Mm,
"Oh, my this belly," or it's just I just got to a point where I said, "I am no longer available for that. I am no longer going to
see.
tolerate that. The same way that I wouldn't tolerate it from someone else, I'm
Yeah.
not tolerating it from myself."
Yeah, I love that because we do. We are so hard on ourselves. We're our
Mhm.
worst critic, and I'll say that sometimes if my friend is just really down on herself, I'm like, I don't like the way you're talking about my friend right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you just got to change your mindset. All right,
Yeah.
shift number two would be ruthless honesty.
Mhm.
So menopause doesn't create problems. It tends
Right.
to expose the ones that we've just been tolerating, right? So what do you think women are lying to themselves about in midlife? Like, what would be something way
You
up
know
there?
what? I think women have gotten so good at lying to themselves about everything, right?
Everything.
Like, think about it. The women who are telling themselves their marriage is fine when it's not, their
Mm,
job is fine when it's not, their kids are fine when it's not, finances they're ignoring. Like,
yeah.
I just think that menopause lowers our tolerance
Mhm.
so that it kind of confronts us with all the ways in which we've been lying to ourselves and
Yeah.
abandoning ourselves. And I think that's one of the most shocking, most disturbing things about menopause is that suddenly it feels like the lights are turned on and the things that were okay before, the
Mhm.
things that you could tolerate before, feel completely unmanageable and unsustainable
Mm,
now, because our body just doesn't have the energy any longer to
mm.
try to make things work that are just not working, you
Yeah.
know?
And really what a blessing that is to have these things kind of happening as much as we hate all of these different symptoms and things we're having with,
Mhm.
menopause, but to allow it to expose the things that we should have gotten rid of long ago, is truly a blessing if we're going to look at it the right way.
But it's
It might be hard.
terrifying. It's
It
it's
is
a
terrible.
blessing, but it's terrifying,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's that sense of like looking around you and being like, this life doesn't fit anymore.
Mm,
I don't fit
scary.
in this life anymore. And
Yeah.
that's so disorienting that some
Mhm.
women will just numb it. They'll
Yes.
just buffer it with social media and food and wine and whatever. It's
Mhm.
like it can be so difficult to face that I think
Mhm.
that's sort of like that pivotal moment where a woman either chooses to go numb to her life and not
Mhm.
change a thing and just sort of suffer in silence, or
Mhm.
she's like, okay, this may turn things upside down a little bit, but I can't play that game anymore. I have to
Mhm.
operate differently going forward.
Yeah. And I love that because we've been doing this series this week of talking to each of the Menopause Love Lounge podcast hosts
Yeah.
and just talking about, each of them, what phase they're in and according to the menopause and how it relates to their life. And I was just mentioning this because I did talk to Don Wiggins about, divorce, and
Hmm.
that's a big thing, and it really sheds a lot of light on that as well, just kind of what you're talking about. When people are going through all of this stuff with their menopause and perimenopause, it really shines a light on the things that are wrong, and then,
Hmm.
she said she has a lot of women that, are now like, "You know what?" Just like you said, "I don't belong in this marriage, like, I
Yeah.
am faking it till I make it in this thing,"
Yeah.
and so it was really interesting to hear that, and we tend to think of it as, like, the worst thing and scariest thing. It is scary, but there's definite positives on the other side. So,
Yeah.
yeah, shift number 3, getting good at disappointing people. So why do so many women struggle with disappointing others? And I'm in it. I'm in that. It's hard. Why
Look,
do we care?
we're products of a culture that
Mhm.
trained us to be nice, to be good girls, to, make people happy, to please people,
Yes.
right? To be agreeable. Like this is what we were trained to do. So it's no wonder that we wake up at a certain point and, our bodies are totally unfamiliar, like all this stuff is happening physically. Emotionally, we feel completely disoriented. It's no wonder because we just have never really learned how to be selfish in a healthy way. And I do
Yeah.
believe that there's a really healthy way to be selfish, but
Mhm.
we need to stop looking to be chosen, looking
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
please. Like we need to essentially approach our life as the leader, as the chooser, as the authority, and we just have not been taught that. So there's a learning curve there that women need to move through in order to, create that sense of personal power that we kind of talked about at the top of the interview.
Yeah, you're so right. And I think we also, and this will lead into shift number 4, is looking at our surroundings and who we surround ourselves with. Who are we trying to impress? Who are we
Hmm.
so worried about disappointing? And when you're really looking at that, I say shift number 4 is who gets a front row seat to your life? Like, how do you know when someone no longer deserves access to you? And I think that's even that, joins in with the disappointing people.
Hmm.
Why are we so worried about that? And is this
Yeah.
person or this relationship really even servicing us anymore that I feel I have to, be an
Hmm.
imposter, I have to say certain things. So, how do you
Yeah.
think someone can kind of figure that out?
Well, I think the goal, right, is to get to a point where we're more willing to disappoint other people than to disappoint ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's, as I said, there's a learning curve there because, your son's a performer, so
Mm,
not
yeah.
everybody has a front row seat, nor should they,
No.
right? And it doesn't
No.
mean that we need to get rid of people, but I think we need to be really clear about the people who give us energy as
Mhm.
opposed to the people who drain our energy, the people we feel safe being fully
Mhm.
ourselves with, the people who are celebrating our growth, who really
Yes.
enhance our life. And we need to reserve the front row seats for those people.
Mhm.
There are
I
some
think so too.
people who are going to be in the nosebleed section and maybe
Yeah.
even out in the parking lot, like,
And
and
a ticket.
that's okay. But
Yeah.
I think the problem is that we try to please everybody, even
Yeah.
those people who are not the ones cheering us on, celebrating our growth, giving us energy, inspiring us. And it's like we're expending all this energy to try to win people over or to try, and it's just, it's depleting us in a way that is, it's detrimental physically and
Yeah,
emotionally. It's again, part of this menopause transition is just realizing we don't have the energy reserves that we once did. We will ultimately hurt ourselves if we
yeah,
don't make those changes. There are consequences to
yeah,
continuing to deplete ourselves in that way.
yeah. Wow. So if people just start making a few of these shifts, start with one and,
Mhm.
work your way through it, what do you think is possible on the other side of menopause? Is it possible to still sustain those new shifts you've made once you, go through perimenopause and menopause? You and I are both through menopause already. I
Yeah.
mean, what a difference you feel, I think, on one side than the other, don't you
Mhm.
think? Yeah,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
just do lease on life.
I am probably in the minority, but I think the best years lie ahead of us. I
Mhm,
think the women who are grieving the loss of their youth, who are grieving being an empty nester, whatever the case
mhm.
may be, are women who believe that their best years are behind them. But I
Yeah,
think that when you truly believe, when you can get yourself to see, that there's so much life to be lived and there's so
mm,
much in the way of freedom, and women have more, less responsibility. Most women have less
yeah,
responsibility with kids and family. They've got more financial resources. They have more time. If you really think about it, we are perfectly positioned to live an extraordinary second half of life.
mm.
you know
This is such good stuff. So I have, before you go, a little 5-question lightning round for you. This is
Mm,
just whatever first comes to mind, okay? So
okay.
number 1, one thing you stop doing in midlife.
Mm. I stopped trying to be nice. I
Ah!
stopped I stopped trying to be liked. I
Yeah.
have accepted I'm not for everybody.
What is one boundary every woman needs?
So I've thought a lot about this because, as I said, I've made some changes this year. Stopped I think it's really important that we stop making big decisions when we're
Mhm.
not in a place of regulation. I think the decisions that I make from a dysregulated place, from a dysregulated nervous system, never tend to be very self-honoring. So
Mm,
now I am much more careful about giving myself time and space to think about things, to regulate
mhm,
my body
mm.
before I make any big decisions.
Yeah, that's great, and it's really in just the way you say it too, if you're like, "Can I get back to you on
Mhm.
that?" I just need to think about it, or, "I don't have the capacity to take that on at the moment. Let me see what else I could do." There's just really nice ways. You don't have to be
Absolutely.
a bitch.
Absolutely.
One thing women need to normalize saying out loud.
I want more.
Mm, it's
I think
okay.
I think women are not really good at expressing, or even desiring more.
Mhm,
We've
mhm,
really been, again, just trained to be content with what we have, to be grateful, to be appreciative. I think it takes a lot of strength and a lot of power to be able to say, I love what I have. I'm grateful for what I have, but
mhm.
I want more,
I want more.
you
That's
know?
a hot word. That's sexy, sexy. All right.
That's right.
Okay. Aging well is not blank, it's blank. What would those 2 words be?
Aging well is not maintenance, it's
Mm.
expansion. It's upgrade.
Nice. I
Yeah.
love it. It's a renovation. I love
Yep.
it. I love it. Perfect. Perfect. So I'm going to save the last question and ask you this right at the end as we're closing this down. But menopause can feel like it is turning everything upside down, as we know. It's going to be mentally, emotionally, physically. But sometimes that disruption is exactly what pushes us to rethink how we treat ourselves, how we're showing up, and what we're no longer willing to tolerate. This is what we're saying here. So, this brings me to this question that I'm asking everyone in this series. Menopause is hell, but it's also an invitation to what? What would you say?
To power, to expansion.
Power.
Yeah.
Mm,
I think
yeah.
I really do. I think it's all about personal power.
That's great. That's so good. So, you guys, thank you so much for listening. If this episode resonated with you, you can DM us. We are on Instagram and TikTok at Menopause Love Lounge, and just DM the word shift and tell us what mindset you might be working on in this chapter of your life. So, you guys can find Karen on Instagram and TikTok at Wellegant Woman. And then you can see both of us on Menopause Love Lounge podcast. If you like what you're hearing, we are asking you guys to come join us in the lounge. It's a conversation, it's not an interview. There's six of us just being real and raw about what we're dealing with and going through with menopause. So we'd love to see you. You can find it anywhere you get your podcast. All right. Well, thank you, Karen, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll talk to you later. Bye bye.